In today's video, I'm going to discuss why do trans people keep bringing up intersex people when the sex and gender issue comes up in debates about trans people and not intersex people. The explanation for this is very simple. It comes down to what is called rules of inference within logic. Now, I know like some of you might be like, oh no, running away or reaching to click. Don't click off. I promise you already understand these rules. They're pretty easy, but we will break them down. So we're going to put our thinking caps on today, and we're actually going to sit down and do some reasoning instead of appealing to our emotions or appealing to any sort of like virtues or our character, right? So rules of inference are simply ways of deriving conclusions from premises within formal logic. And it goes something like this. If the premises are true within an argument and you use a valid rule of inference, that means that the conclusion must be true. It must be true. It follows. The two specific rules we're going to talk about, one is called modus ponens, and the other is called modus tollens. Now, there are negations, conjunctions, disjunctions, a whole bunch of these rules. But for the purposes of this video, we only need those two rules. And it's the same reason why intersex people are brought up. And you might be saying, like, I don't get the connection. So let's just first demonstrate that you intuitively already understand these two rules of inference. I'm going to give you two examples. First example will be of modus ponens, and the second will be modus tollens. I know it's philosophy words, but I promise you get it. So modus ponens just says, if P, then Q, P, therefore Q. Let's put the letters aside for a second and break it down into actual propositions. All this is saying, because you can insert any proposition into P and Q, and if they're both true, and modus ponens is a valid rule of inference, then the conclusion would be true. So let's say the proposition, if it is snowing, then there would be snow on the ground. So P, if it is snowing, Q, there is snow on the ground. Then the second part of it, P, it is snowing, therefore Q, there is snow on the ground. That's all modus ponens is. It's if, then, very easy. If it's snowing, there's snow on the ground. Look, it's snowing, therefore snow on the ground. The other rule, modus tollens, is the exact opposite. It's the reverse of this. So you would just say, if P, then Q, not Q, therefore not P. If it is snowing, there would be snow on the ground. There is no snow on the ground, therefore it is not snowing. I feel like we all can agree to this. There's nothing controversial. These are just basic rules of inference. And I promised, like, you already understand this. This is pretty intuitive. But let's take this and start applying it to the sex gender problem. And it'll start to become more clear very quickly why intersex conditions are brought up in these dialectics. So first, sex and gender. Trans people and people that are studied in gender studies tend to understand that sex and gender are different concepts. Sex is responding to your biological functions of your reproductive organs, chromosomes, gametes, these types of things. And then gender is typically the social construct that is the ways that certain genders behave, the way that people dress, certain speech patterns, affectations, could be certain jobs or roles that people have within society. And people associate those sorts of things, certain clothing, certain ways of speaking, having long hair, short hair, etc. They will associate those things with specific gender roles or certain gender expressions. Now, I don't want to go too far into it because there's way more queer theory about gender specifically. Let's just deal with the transphobic response, what their argument is. Their argument is that a woman is an adult human female, because to the transphobe, their argument often hinges on sex and gender being the exact same thing, like they're synonyms, or they are a Venn diagram that is so close together, it's almost a perfect circle. That's according to them. So according to them, they would say, let's thinking cap now, modus ponens. They would say if sex, so if XX chromosomes, then gender. So then a woman. So if XX chromosomes, woman, XX chromosomes, therefore woman. That's modus ponens. Modus tollens of the exact same argument would be saying if XX chromosomes, a woman, not XX chromosomes, therefore not a woman. That would be their argument in modus ponens and modus tollens. Now, there could be a symmetry breaker, or there are defeaters for this position, because remember, the only way this is true is if both premises are true, then the conclusion is true. And intersex people demonstrate precisely why their premises are not true. It's false. I'll give you an example. There's an intersex condition called 46XY, I think it's syndrome or karyotype. This results in a person that has the sexual biology of what will be associated with a female. So they have a vagina, womb, ovaries, etc., except they have XY chromosomes. There's plenty of documented cases of these people getting pregnant, giving birth, and often living their entire lives without being aware that they have XY chromosomes. Very often, it's the case that a daughter gets tested, finds out she has XY chromosomes, and in some cases, when they've gone and investigated and tested the mother and grandmother, it turned out that all the women within her generations, all of them had XY chromosomes. So very clearly, the premise, if XX chromosomes, woman, XX chromosomes, therefore woman, and then the modus tollens, that's not true, because there are some women that have XY chromosomes. So the claim that if XX chromosomes, therefore woman, is not true in the modus tollens, because you could say XY, this person has XY chromosomes, but they are still a woman. Because this defeats the modus tollens, this would also inversely, if you run it the reverse way, it defeats their modus ponens position. Now, this might not sound like that big of a deal to a transphobe. They might try to hand wave this and maintain their argument, but all you need to demonstrate that a position is not valid and sound is one specific defeater for this. One strong case. Now, I gave you the example of a pure 46XY karyotype female person that's able to give birth, and they are a woman with XY chromosomes. I gave you one example. There are numerous intersex conditions, numerous, where you will find the exact same flaw within their reasoning. On the trans worldview, when you end up having sex and gender being separate, one being social and the other being biological, we don't have this problem. We don't have a contradiction in our worldview. And when people get upset, they're like, why do trans people keep bringing up intersex conditions when I'm debating trans issues? Part of it is because some intersex people also identify as being transgender. So if you have those intersex people, are you going to tell them that they cannot mention their intersex conditions in those dialectics? And there are, I'm aware, some intersex people that get upset that they get brought up in conversations about transgender people because they don't identify as transgender, and they feel like they are being unfairly dragged into an argument, into a fight that they didn't ask for or they didn't want. Well, trans people did not ask for this fight. We did not ask to be made a flashpoint in some culture war, nor do we like having all this legislation targeting us, being abused, treated as second-class citizens. And because of that, we are going to use the tools at our disposal to argue for our rights and to be treated fairly. And anyone who examines the information will come to the inevitable conclusion that sex and gender are not the same thing because of these intersex conditions that will easily defeat the argument, the rhetoric that they have, that sex and gender are the same thing. That is just one piece of why intersex people are brought up in discussions that revolve around trans people. It also explains why intersex conditions are the defeater for this rationale that sex and gender are synonyms or the exact same thing. And obviously, a worldview that includes biological sex being separate from gender identity as a social construct does not run afoul of this issue. We have none of these problems with logic in the same way that transphobes do. And this is why I will often say that being transphobic, maintaining transphobic beliefs is irrational. It's because once you break it down and you start examining it, it becomes very obvious there are fatal flaws in their reasoning. And they will often just fall back to tired old cliches about trans people, or appealing to your emotions, or trying to talk about why you should listen to them or claim some expertise or whatever. But that's not going to dig them out of this hole. They cannot rehabilitate this argument. They would have to either move to our position or just maintain being irrational when it comes to trans issues. If you gained anything out of this video, I hope you give it a like and a subscribe, and I will see you next time.